Tonight, Republicans in a dicey spot over impeachment. Some of them, they're in tank for the president no matter what. Others, they're scared to take a stand. We're going to take a look at the politics of impeachment. Then, the death toll mounting in northern Syria, and so is criticism of the president for his move to pull out and let the Kurds fend for themselves. Much of that criticism coming from Republicans. Then, if President Trump was hoping to ride a strong economy into a second term, his trip may be taking a detour. We're going to show you where there's trouble and explain why it's in the states that could hurt Trump most come the ballot box. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French, and thank you for joining me this Friday evening. And we start tonight with the impeachment inquiry and the latest closed-door hearings on Capitol Hill all over Ukraine. Well, today, the former U.S. ambassador to that country testified, even though the White House and State Department tried to block her from appearing. Maria Ivanovich, she testified in a scathing indictment of the administration's foreign policy. She reportedly said political motives and personal gain undermined U.S. policy and the nation's interests. She was a 33-year veteran of the Foreign Service, working for multiple administrations, both Republican and Democrat. But Trump, he pushed her out after the Ukraine story broke. And Gordon Sondland, the U.S. ambassador to the European Union, he will testify next week, also behind closed doors. The State Department also doesn't want him to appear, but it looks like he will defy them. Sondland, he is the political appointee and major Trump donor who is at the center of the Ukraine scandal. He worked with Rudy Giuliani on his efforts in Ukraine to try to get dirt on Joe Biden and his son Hunter. Sondland's texts, they have been released, and they show he worked to get Ukraine to commit to investigating the Bidens. Then there's the whistleblower himself. He who brought the Ukraine scandal to light, the Wall Street Journal reporting that he would like to submit written testimony to Congress instead of appearing in person. He is worried about revealing his identity, and I have to say, I don't blame him. The president is calling him a spy, continuing to blast him, and right-wing activists, they've even offered a $50,000 bounty to anyone who outs him. Now, the impeachment inquiry, it is twisting many Republicans into knots. Some of them, they're trying to stay on the fence and refrain from criticizing the president, even when asked directly about the crux of impeachment. Now, I'm talking about the president asking foreign governments to get involved in our elections. Now, here, a couple of GOP senators who are up for election next year who are trying to avoid the whole thing.
Do you believe it's appropriate for the President of the United States to ask a foreign leader to investigate a political rival? Yes or no?
Well, look, this is what we're going to get into. The Senate Intelligence Committee is having an investigation.
Is it appropriate for a president?
Look, I think we are going to have an investigation, and it's a nonpartisan investigation.
But Senator,
it's a nonpartisan investigation.
Is it appropriate for a president to ask a foreign power to investigate a domestic political rival? Yes or no?
Well, again, I think we're going to have to go back, just as I said last week. We'll have to wait.
But is it appropriate, just the ask itself? Is it appropriate?
We don't have all the facts in front of us.
And let's bring in our panel. Dominic Carter, political journalist and author. Also former Republican congressman from Connecticut, Chris Shays, and Andrew Whitman, senior political correspondent. Congressman, I would guess that it's in windows of times like this that you don't miss Washington. But do you even recognize Congress nowadays in that with what they have in front of them, either some dereliction of duty, others trying to run for the hills? We'll play some sound in a little bit here, but it's not a ton of profiles and courage on the Hill.
Well, there's nothing surprising. And let me just say, impeachment is very personal for every member because every member is going to equate the impact on their own election. For Republicans, most Republicans who vote for impeachment or criticize the president would lose a Republican primary. When I voted against impeachment of a Democratic president because I thought President Clinton, the impeachable offenses weren't proven and the proven offenses weren't impeachable. Having said that, there were 39 of the 40 Republican town committee people, 40 total, 39, said the man should be impeached. And I ended up in a primary in New Canaan and Darien and Bridgeport. So this is really difficult stuff for members. Once you even besides the merit. And the second thing I'd say to you is that this is going to be the Democrats' one shot. If they impeach him but don't remove him, he is going to feel like he can do whatever he wants. So this is really dicey.
Yeah, and I want to get that, but the substantive, the Mueller report, I understand for a lot of folks was hard to digest, and it was dense. This ain't that complicated in that if you just stay on the subject of Ukraine for a moment, the president clearly, from even the transcript, not even the full thing, clearly was requesting aid from a foreign country to go after a political opponent. You go into what the framers had to say when they put together the Constitution, they consider that a high crime and misdemeanor. So my only point is, if people don't want to do it or they do want to do it in terms of voting for impeachment, no one can say, as we've seen so many lawmakers, I have to wait to learn more. That's a cop-out. We already know enough to say either you think that that's an impeachable offense or it's not.
Yeah, well, first off, our founding fathers weren't all saying that that would be impeachable. You could make an argument that he should be censured and not removed from office. It's incredibly significant when you overturn the will of the American people. And he got elected, for better or worse. And people have a right to elect a terrible president, a dishonest president. And so... But
do we, and I try as best I can, we're all human beings, we come in with our own blinders here to it, but as objectively as possible, I really believe that if Obama or Clinton did this, to me, I would think that's such an attack on our democratic system as a republic. The idea that you can't, think of the consequences if we say it's okay. Countries are going to be lining up here to try and get dirt on political opponents of a sitting president because they'll obviously engender benefits from a White House. Can we really let this stand?
We can't let it stand. We can't say it's okay. I'm just saying that there is something besides overturning the vote of the American people. And the president is going to so mess up the debate. For instance, I did that. But that's not an impeachable offense. And there are going to be a whole group of Americans who don't think it's an impeachable offense. The worst thing that could happen is for the president to be impeached without some Republicans supporting impeachment. And if they don't support impeachment,
all right, just one more thing, and then you guys jump in. What is your educated guess? I saw that Senator Flake of Arizona, the former senator, Republican senator, said, and he was there only till a year ago, he said, I bet you there's 35 Republican senators who, if it was an anonymous vote today, would vote to impeach this president. But we know it's not an anonymous vote. What would have to happen of evidence would have to come to the fore that would take that anonymous impeach vote and make it a public one?
Well, I'm sad to say that, first off, in some House districts, even if the president is clearly guilty, they could vote no against impeachment, and they'd get pats on the back by enough of their Republicans to get the nomination and come back to Congress.
But they don't need
a
single Republican to get on board for this, even though some have already said that they might be willing. I'm talking in the Senate.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, though, if it's just a partisan vote, if you can't convince Republican members of Congress and the Senate to impeach and remove, then it looks too partisan to too many people in America. I would have found reasons to, well, let me put it differently. He's given us reason almost every day to not want him to be president, think he's destructive and dangerous and so on. I just don't know if you can satisfy the public, enough of them to feel comfortable that you overturned an election.
I'm just curious because you mentioned the politics that each member is going to have to face within their own districts, and that'll determine, I think you're right, determine how they vote on impeachment or removal. But at what point, this is my Pollyannish question, for the good of the country, or putting the national interest above their own personal political interest, is there a point at which that diverges, where even a congressman who might face electoral hazards for voting to impeach might do so because to save the nation?
You triggered a question at the very beginning, and I'll answer it this way. I wish I was still there. I really wish I was still there. If you have a core group of people who are willing to show that courage and do what's right, then I think they become almost like honey. I think others then. And then I think a big wave. And there are a whole group of members that if they saw enough people do it, they would join. So I think you have to get a critical mass, and then others will join.
I got one last thing. Today in the Washington Post, 17 former prosecutors involved in Watergate on a bipartisan level said that they would, the president committed impeachable offenses. What has struck me, maybe more than a lot of folks, is the arguments of the White House to not be participatory, to not respect subpoenas, to not turn over documents, to not allow people to testify. If somehow, some way that's allowed, even if you're the most conservative congressman, your elected office, the legislative branch, the check and balance that we're supposed to have in this country with co-equal branches of government, we're basically saying that we don't have a president anymore, we have a king. Yeah, and the only way he or she can be removed is at the ballot box every 4 years.
Okay, so let me give you in the mind of some Republicans. They thought that happened under Clinton, and they thought it happened under Secretary of State, Mrs. Clinton. They think the Democrats have done all these things in the past. They don't think Trump is doing anything new. I mean, just look at one thing. Hillary Clinton decided that she was going to have her own system in her own house because she didn't want the public to know and have information of what she was doing that would become part of freedom of information. Totally outrageous. She never paid a penalty for that.
Oh, she lost an election for it.
Well, but my point is, there are just too many people in this country who feel the Democrats have done the same stuff that this president, even if they haven't, even if you can't equate them, they think they're equal.
When we come back, we're going to keep the conversation with this because we're going to talk about the other huge story this week, and that is what's happening in Syria. The death toll rising by the minute, and the criticism of the president's move to abandon the Kurds is also on the rise. We're going to see just how bad things are getting and how much more here. Even Republicans are going after this president for his decisions. Stay with us.